every country has a conscience. Every country has horrific stories of its creation, the violence of it. But you should learn from the past. I mean, I'm a history buff. I go back and look at, I try and learn from, pre-First World War in terms of how Europe looks today. And I really enjoy that work, but I realize there's nobody that's perfect. Wow.
Well, it's
It was
so
a very
interesting that you
violent,
say that, though.
society was violent
Yeah.
from 2,500 years
Gotcha.
ago.
It's so interesting that you said that, because right before we went to break, you asked me what country was I living in. This one that we just went through.
You should be
the country
happy to
that
live
did
here.
the country that just did what they did. So for you to sit here and act like you just didn't say, what country are you talking about? What country, puts people in jail wrong? What country enslaves folks, which is pretty much the private prison system? What country does this? You can't possibly be a history buff and
I
also
am,
say that
actually.
as well.
Let me give you how
So-
bad it can be. The Romans used to burn to the
You
ground.
can't never
and
give me how bad it
salt
could be.
the
You
earth.
could never give me how bad it could be. I live it on
That
a
was
daily
bad.
basis,
The
baby.
Romans
I
were
live it
pretty
on
bad.
a daily basis, honey.
They were bad
I
dudes.
live it on a daily basis. You can never tell me how bad it could be. But I would encourage you to actually be the history buff that you claim that you are,
Well, where
and
do you
really
wanna
get some
move to?
understanding. It's not about me. I'm
I
not
think-
going
I
nowhere.
think
I'm staying
the-
right
I
here.
think the
I'll get you a
question
You don't
visa
need to
to
give me no
China.
visa to
All right.
China.
Kevin,
Babe,
Kevin, I
I'm
think
better.
the
I'm
question
staying
here
right
would
here.
You
be,
like North
guys,
Korea? How about that
we don't
one?
have a
How
ton of
about
time
little
in this
Cuba?
segment. Go
How
ahead.
about that?
What's up, family? So we got to talk about Abby Phillip's show on CNN, because what's happening over there is not debate, it's not discussion, it's not journalism. It's basically a gang up session every single night, and everybody watching can see it. Okay, the show is going downhill fast, and the reason is simple: the panel is stacked, and when I say stacked, I mean it's loaded up with liberals, and when you look at it, meaning people on the left politically who believe in bigger government, more regulations, more federal control over things. And then they'll throw one conservative on the panel, in this case, Kevin O'Leary, and one conservative. And a conservative is just someone who believes in smaller government, lower taxes, less federal control, more personal responsibility. And then what happens? It's like putting one kid in the middle of a dodgeball game and the entire other team is aiming at his head. And that's not a debate. That's not balance. That's not even interesting television. That's just predictable. And the worst part is, it's not just the panel doing it. It feels like the moderator herself, Abby Phillip, is in on it too. Now, the moderator is supposed to be the referee. Think about a basketball game. The ref doesn't grab the ball and start shooting for one team. The ref calls fouls evenly. The ref keeps the game fair. But on this show, it feels like the ref is playing for one side. So you got four liberals talking over one conservative, cutting him off, rolling their eyes, acting like everything he say is crazy. And then when the conservative finally says, in this case, like I said, Kevin O'Leary, I'm referring to, yo, this is insane. Suddenly everybody is clutching their pearls like they're shocked. But shocked for what? You've been poking the bear for 20 minutes straight, and conservatives are just finally saying out loud what a lot of people at home are thinking. That the arguments coming from the left on that panel sound completely detached from reality. And when someone says insane, they don't mean it as a medical diagnosis. Obviously, they mean the ideas don't make sense in the real world. And if you tell regular working people who are struggling to pay rent, buy groceries, and fill up their gas tank that the economy is stronger than ever, especially from a liberal mindset, when it came to, for example, the Biden administration, they're going to look at you like you lost your mind. And that's the disconnect with these liberals. And Kevin O'Leary, who, by the way, is a successful businessman, not some career politician, basically said what everybody can see. He questioned what the point of the show even is if it's just going to be one side of the tax. And that set the panel off. But why? If your arguments are so strong, if your ideas are so solid, then you shouldn't need a 4-on-1 advantage every night. Imagine if you went to a family dinner and every time you opened your mouth, four relatives jumped in to shout you down before you could finish your sentence. At some point, you're going to stop going to the dinner, right? And that's what this show feels like. It doesn't feel like let's change ideas. It feels like let's humiliate the one person who disagrees with us. And that's the bigger issue here. It's not even about left versus right anymore, or, Democrat versus Republican. It's about rather cable news wants real discussion, or they just want viral moments where everybody piles on the bad guy of the night. And viewers aren't stupid. Regular people can smell when something's staged, when it's lopsided, when it's not genuine. And if CNN actually wanted real debate, they'll balance the panel 2 and 2 or 3 and 2, something that feels fair. But when it's clearly one ideological team versus one person, and the moderator seems to lean in the same direction as the majority, don't act surprised when conservatives start calling it out, and don't act shocked when someone like Kevin O'Leary says the quiet part out loud. Like, what exactly is the point of this show anymore? Because if it's not about discussion, if it's not about persuasion, if it's not about actually understanding the other side, then it's just theater. And people are getting tired of the same script. And I want to move on to a second clip.
Why are you obsessed with him having them if he can't do anything with them?
He's creating
You know what
a
I'm saying?
pattern.
Like, what are you talking about?
Because you're creating the likelihood where he can
What
come up with a
likelihood? He's
different...
going to make fake ballots for the next time out of the old ballots from this time? Oh, okay.
But let me just make this point, which I think is...
This is deep stuff, ladies.
Okay, let me just say something, though. We are seeing this happen over and over again, where the federal government is fabricating things, lying. Yes. Just in the last few weeks, we have seen cases involving...
Like
May I? We have seen cases involving federal agents with a Venezuelan national in Minneapolis, who they claimed had charged them with a snow shovel and attacked them.
What does that have to do with the
Let me get my
ballot?
point across, and then you can. And the point is
Help me.
The point is that they charged them criminally, and when they went to court, evidence proved that what they had said was a lie. That this government lies. That's the point.
All right, Kevin, a quick last word.
Oh, wow.
Which I'm
My
not sure.
last word is, you're all nuts. Like, that's just...
Oh, my God.
Thank you, Kevin.
Guys,
Am I in on that? Okay.
look, we got to keep it together here, okay?
We are. Too late.
Honestly, I mean, there's a way to talk about these things. If you don't have anything to say, just say that, and I won't come to you next time.
You don't
All
have
right,
basic
next
information,
for us,
Kevin.
everyone, thank you for being here.
That was a stretch. It was
Next,
insane.
excuse me,
A shovel to
excuse
the
me,
ballots?
stop,
What's the shovel?
Kevin, stop.
The federal government lies.
Next for us, we are
Sorry, that's
honoring.
crazy.
You guys saw that, right? You heard it. Kevin O'Leary finally just said what everybody watching at home has been thinking this whole time. He just dropped it straight on the table. This makes no sense. This is crazy. What are we even doing here? And people are acting shocked like he committed some crime, but let's be honest. He just said the quiet part out loud. You are all nuts. He wasn't trying to be cute. He was trying to be polite. He was reacting to the fact that the conversation had completely been going off the rails. And they were supposed to be talking about Georgia, about the raids, about the ballots, about what was actually happening on the ground. For anybody who doesn't know, ballots, are physical votes, people casting an election. And raids, when it comes to law enforcement, showing up to investigate potential wrongdoing, that was the topic. That's what the segment was supposed to be about. And then Anna Navarro just pivots into something that had nothing to do with the ballots. Nothing to do with Georgia, nothing to do with the Pacific issue on the table. It's like if you're arguing about whether your car needs new brakes and somebody suddenly starts talking about your cousin's parking ticket from 3 years ago. That's not the topic. That's not helpful. That's just noise. And Kevin O'Leary basically hit the point where he said, screw it. Because when you are the only person on that panel trying to stay on topic and everybody else keeps dragging the conversation into emotional side streets, eventually you're going to snap. And the reason people at home are nodding along isn't because they love drama. It is because they recognize when someone feels unreasonable, or when something feels unreasonable, not someone, when something feels unreasonable. And that's the word here, unreasonable. When you can't stay focused, when you can't answer direct questions, when everything turns into a lecture or moral performance instead of a discussion, regular people check out. Still, they go, okay, this isn't serious. And then the night before, which was, February 16th, in the first clip, that was just Monday of this week on President's Day, you guys seen Teslin Vigaro, right? Basically saying, oh, you are a history buffer. Then you're not going to tell me the country you asked me on the break what we were talking about. Well, this is the country we're talking about, right? What Kevin O'Leary was trying to explain to Teslin Vigaro was about Cuba and how the privileges living in the United States of America is far have overcame the horrific things in its history, and nobody in no country in history was perfect, but we came a long way in the United States of America. You should be grateful. Then she started going into about, oh, I'm in the service and blah 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 blah. And at the end of the day, Kevin O'Leary was like, well, where do you want to go? Cuba? Where do you want to live then? And she was like, no, I'm staying here. And that was the first clip you heard from Tesla and Viguero. And when you look at that, right, and you see the conversation spirals, instead of breaking down policy, meaning actual rules and laws that affect people's lives, it turns into this emotional demand for acknowledgement and validation in the middle of debate about slavery and history. Now, slavery, for anyone who doesn't watch or follow political talk shows, is obviously the historical system where Black Americans were legally owned as property before the Civil War. And it's a serious topic. It deserves, serious discussion. But what happens on this panel is that instead of sticking to the facts, timelines, policy implications, and what any of this means today, it becomes a moment where she's essentially asking Trump supporters on the panel, Tesla Viguero, to acknowledge and thank her for her military service during a conversation about slavery. Military service, which is people serving in the armed forces, the Army, the Navy, Air Force, Marines, and all respect and thank you for my servicemen and servicewomen defending this country, United States of America. Thank you for all that you do. But listen, right? And listen, serving your country is honorable, is what I'm saying. Period. But dropping that in the middle of a totally different argument and demanding emotional recognition from political opponents, that's not debate. That's turning a conversation into a personal loyalty test. Imagine you're arguing with a coworker about how to fix a problem at work. And in the middle of it, they say, well, before we can continue, I need you to thank me for staying late last month. That may be true. That may be valid, but it has nothing to do with the issue you're debating right now. That's why Kevin O'Leary hit his breaking point, because these segments stop being about ideas and start being about performance. That's why he said, you guys are nuts. Like, you all are nuts. And when conservatives say this is insane, what they mean is this doesn't follow basic logic. One person says A, the other person responds with Z. And then everybody pretends that's a real exchange. It's not. It's chaos. And regular people working jobs, paying bills, raising kids, don't have time for political theater. They want clear answers. They want to know what happened in Georgia. They want to know what the evidence is. They want to know what the law says. They don't want to watch a panel turn into a shouting match where the topic changes every 5 minutes. So when Kevin O'Leary said, you are all nuts, he wasn't trying to be dramatic. He was reacting to a format that feels completely detached from common sense. And that's why moments like that are happening more and more, because eventually when a conversation stops being grounded in facts and starts floating in emotion and deflection, somebody's going to say, what are we even doing? And that's exactly what it did. So yeah, let's get into this segment in regards to the matter, because I want you guys to see a perfect example of what Kevin O'Leary was talking about. And right here is what it is. And this is exactly what he was doing.
Erase history. To Kevin's point, we can't erase history. And those who don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. So obviously we need to acknowledge that this was a shameful chapter in American history. And I think, I don't know anybody who doesn't want to acknowledge that and acknowledge that that was a terrible, horrible chapter. I think it's interesting, though. I look at universities and some of these people are so educated and they don't have a love for America. And so I think I would love to see, in addition to acknowledging terrible moments in history, I'd also love to see the fact celebrated that America is really the only civilization that's ended slavery. And so I think we need to have both elements there.
Do you think I love America?
I'm sure you do.
No, I mean, do you, as a military veteran,
Of course.
veteran, do you think I love America?
Of
and
course.
do you also think that erasing what actually happened to my ancestors that actually fought for this country
don't think
when they
it should
couldn't
be
even sit at land?
erased.
But it's not just about trying to erase it. It's about actually acknowledging and doing something about it. It's one thing for me to acknowledge something, and there's something else to sit here and act like there's nothing that needs to be corrected.
Nobody is trying to erase history. Let's kill that narrative right now. We live in the internet era. You could pull up original documents, speeches, letters, court cases, old newspapers, all of it in 5 seconds on your phone while you're sitting on a couch using AI if you want to, if you're really that savvy. History is archived, recorded, backed up, screenshotted, duplicated. You are not erasing slavery. You are not deleting the Holocaust. You are not wiping out Japanese internment camps. That's ridiculous. What people actually have a problem with is this constant, nonstop weaponization of history, meaning using past tragedies like a tool, like a hammer, to beat people over the head today for the things they personally did not do. Slavery was evil, period. It was a system where human beings were legally owned as property. The Holocaust was evil. That was Nazi Germany, murdering 6 million Jews during World War II. Japanese internment camps were wrong. That was when the U.S. government locked up Japanese Americans during World War II just because of their ancestry. None of that is being denied. None of that is being erased. The issue is when those events get dragged into every single modern conversation as a guilt trip tactic. It's like if your great grandfather got into a bar fight in 1920, and now every time you walk into a restaurant, someone says, "Before we seat you, let's talk about what your family did." That makes no sense. You weren't there. You weren't there. You didn't throw the punch. You're just trying to order dinner. That's how regular people feel. They're not saying forget history. They are saying stop using history like emotional blackmail to push modern political agendas. And when I say far left policy, let me define that in simple terms. That means political ideas that push for massive government control over society, sweeping social changes, and often policies that go way beyond what most average voters are comfortable with. So instead of debating those ideas on their own merits, meaning are they good? Do they work? Will they help people? The tactic becomes, well, if you don't support this, you're siding with slavery. If you don't agree, you're ignoring the Holocaust. If you question this policy, you are dismissing oppression. That's not debate. That's emotional pressure. That's like in a family argument when someone says, if you really love me, you'll agree with me. That's manipulation, not logic. And people are tired of being told they need to feel personal guilt for historical events they had zero control over, zero participation in, to zero connection to beyond living in the same country decades or centuries later. You can acknowledge that America has done bad things, like I said earlier in this video, because every country in the history of the world has done bad things, without accepting the idea that you personally are morally responsible for fixing the past by signing off on whatever new policy someone labels as justice. Two things could be true at once. History matters, and weaponizing history is dishonest. And what really frustrates people is the smear campaign against the founders, the constant framing that because the founders lived in a flawed time, the entire foundation of the country is rotten. That's like saying because your grandparents weren't perfect, your entire family is illegitimate. Your entire family is illegitimate because your grandparents weren't perfect. It ignores context. It ignores progress. It ignores the fact that the same constitution written in that era is the document that was later used to abolish slavery and expand civil rights. So no, people aren't trying to erase history. They're pushing back against the idea that history should be used as a moral leash around their neck to force compliance with modern ideological demands. That's the real argument. And when you strip away all the drama and buzzwords, it's actually simple. Teach history honestly, yes. Remember it, absolutely. So teach history honestly, yes. I'm going to say it again for the people in the back. And remember it, absolutely. Learn from it 100%, but stop turning into a political guilt weapon every 5 minutes to shut down debate. Regular people see through that. And that's what this backlash is really about. Let's continue.
This lovely gentleman sat right here and tried to erase it, literally sitting next to me, literally. So and even doing the comparison, saying, would you rather go to China or not go to China? Are you a veteran? So that means you never raised the pause means no. So that means he never raised his
Wait a
hand to say,
second.
I'm willing to die for this country. Let's stop talking about just the Dow. Not only was I willing to die for this country, both of my grandparents
Thank you
were.
for your service.
That's right. Thank me for my service.
I wouldn't have thanked her for shit. And I'm just being honest. The entitlement, the rudeness. Now, don't get me wrong. Service is honorable. But at the end of the day, you committed to that service because you obviously believed upholding American culture in the United States of America. So at the end of the day, you did your service on choice because we have a privilege to be in the service that we choose to be, right? And it's an honorable thing again. But the simple fact is to lead with entitlement and to sit there and deflect and go from slavery and then sit there and try to bash this country and say, well, the United States, the country I live in, you asked me on the break, Kevin O'Leary. Reminding it's one thing to sit there and fight and overcome and continue to be in the right trajectory, doing what's right for the United States of America, so we continue to go in the right direction, learning from our bad mistakes. But then it's another thing to sit there and say, oh, well, thank me for my service. But then at the same ticket, you're bashing the country that you obviously did service in. So it seems like to me, you selfishly want to be honored, but you bashing the country that you so-called so proud of honoring. But how can you if you always mentioning the bad things about the country that you so-called stood up for in the name of service? So now, how honorable are you as an individual? And I'm questioning her character. Forget the service aspect now because you're full of shit. So how I'm supposed to sit here and say thank you for your service, but then you bashing the country as if you didn't want to do the service? How honorable is that? You willing to fight for a country that you sit here bashing and saying how horrible, and this is the country I live in every day, and I suffer, and I sit here and gotta continue to go through racism and all of that while you on this panel deflecting to use history to push your political ideology and your belief. And instead of having a productive conversation, we could agree to disagree, you pushing it on to the simple fact that now it's showing your true colors. That you could give a damn about this country, but you willing to use the country, United States of America, and its flaws for any way to benefit things going in your favor when it comes to the conversation and how you want things to go. You are a controlling, combative woman. So how can you represent United States of America so proudly, huh? Teslin Figaro, Miss Figaro. So I want to explain this so nobody twists this, right? Full context. Teslin Figaro served in the Air Force Reserves. The reserves mean you're just part-time military. You train, you could be called up if needed, but it's not the same thing as being deployed into active combat every single day. That's just a fact. Good on her for serving. Seriously. Anybody who signs up to serve in any capacity, cool. Respect. But don't sit there and act like because you were in the reserves that everybody in the room now owes you an applause on command. That's where it gets crazy because gratitude doesn't work like that. If I tell somebody, thank you for your service, it's because I genuinely feel that way. It's voluntary. It's organic. It's like holding the door open for somebody. It means something because you chose to do it. The second you demand it, the second you say, before we continue this debate, I need you to thank me. Now it's fake. And it tells a lot about your character. Now it's forced. Now it's not appreciation, it's compliance. And that's the part that's obnoxious to me. Military service does not give you a debate shield. It doesn't make your political arguments automatically correct. It doesn't make you better than the next person. It doesn't mean nobody can criticize your logic. That's like saying, I worked overtime last week, so that means in my opinion about the company budget is automatically right. No, it doesn't. Two separate things. Your service is one thing. The argument on the table is another thing. When you start using your service as a way to deflect criticism, meaning instead of responding to the point someone made, you switch the focus to respect me. That's manipulation. That's not debate. That's emotional leverage. And regular people see that. Most Americans appreciate the military. They should. Most people do say thank you when they see someone in uniform. But what they don't like is being told they are morally required to say it in the middle of a political disagreement. And not the way she's weaponizing it. And not the way she's sitting here bashing the country in one sentence. And then in the same sentence sitting here, she saying she was in the service and fought for this country. But then sitting there trying to continue to remind us of all the wrongs and the bad history of this country. And how she is discovering the worst of the worst in this country. Then why the hell you here? So now the question begs further, it makes me more skeptical of you. It makes me more concerned and curious of what side you on. Are you really for this country or pro-America? Are you really for this country and pro-America? Or are you for this country when it benefit your ass? I just think you just being outright disrespectful. Now it takes the conversation away from honoring our servicemen and servicewomen. And I'm gonna still honor you for the simple fact of you being in the service. That's an honorable act and an honorable choice to do. But for her in particular, that's as far as I'm going. Thank you for your service. But as far as you as a person, I ain't got to rock with you because you flip-floppy. And I'll be damned if you sit here and bash the United States of America while you still reap the benefits and enjoy the privileges. So I can't respect you as a person, but I respect the service component or anybody who's in the service, if that makes sense, family. Let me know what your guys' thoughts is down below. Now, like I was saying, when you look at it, it's like being in an argument with someone and instead of answering your point, they say, before we go any further, I need you to acknowledge I'm a mother. Okay, Ann, what does that have to do with what we're discussing right now? This is a distraction, is my point. That's all Tesla and Figueroa is doing, is being a big old distraction. And doing that on national television, demanding gratitude like it's owed to you, comes off very entitled. And it comes off like you think you're above the conversation. And that's exactly what Kevin O'Leary was reacting to. When he says this is nuts, this is what he means. It's not about disrespecting service. It's about rejecting the idea that service makes you untouchable in a debate. If I had to sit on a panel every night where people dodge questions, change topics, and then pull out the emotional trump cards to avoid defending their points, yeah, I'll be frustrated too. Anybody would. Any sane person. Imagine arguing about how to fix your neighborhood and somebody suddenly says, well, I volunteered at the food bank, so you need to thank me before you speak. What? That has nothing to do with whether your idea makes sense. That's the energy people are reacting to. And when that keeps happening over and over, eventually somebody's going to say what Kevin said. This is insane. This is nuts. You people are nuts. Because it is. Debate the issue, stand on your argument, but don't demand applause as a substitute for logic. That's where people draw the line.
So how dare he sit here and ask me?
Service.
So how dare he sit here and ask me would I rather be in China when I was willing to die for the country that is locking up the people that we're talking about? There are more black men enslaved than those who were enslaved in 1850 in the prison system right now in 1850 that did not actually get the due process that you guys are talking about, that actually had to take plea bargains because they could not afford adequate law attorneys, which is why I'm in law school, by the way, right now. Shout out to FAMU.
So now we're at the point where if you're a black man, you commit a crime, you take a plea deal, which is a plea bargain is when someone is charged with a crime agrees to plead guilty, meaning they admit they did it in exchange for a lighter sentence, so they don't have to take a risk or take the risk for a full trial. Somehow that equals to slavery now. You see what I mean? She went from saying how horrible the country is, reminding us of the history, and slavery is trying to be erased from history, to, oh, now you need to give me my respect because I'm in the service. And now that if you're black, you commit a crime, it is mind-blowing to me. So somehow that equals slavery if you're black and you commit a crime. You're a black man and you commit a crime, to be more specific to what she's saying, right? That's the argument now. So somebody taking a plea deal, which is mean pleading guilty, meaning they admit they did it in exchange for a lighter sentence so they don't have to risk taking a full trial, that equals slavery as a black man. That's the argument. Come on, man. Like slavery was people being owned as property. No choice, no rights, no pay, no freedom. You were born into it and you died in it. A plea deal is a legal decision, meaning a choice, right? Made inside a court system where you have an attorney. a judge, and options. You may not like the options. You may not trust a public defender. That's a government provided lawyer for people who can't afford one, but it is still a legal process with agency involved. You made a choice. Maybe it was a hard choice. Maybe it was the least bad option, but it still was a choice. To compare that to slavery is wild, bruh. Like, that's like saying somebody getting fired from their job is the same thing as being kidnapped. Words have meanings, and when you start stretching them like that, they lose all seriousness. And here's what makes it even crazier. The person pushing this narrative, in this case, Teslin Figaro, is basically, she's rich, right? She's rich and comfortably successful, rich, and living in a affluent neighborhood, meaning a wealthy area, right? A wealthy white area, since she wants to make this a black and white thing. On national television, making good money, enjoying all the benefits of the system she's claiming is equivalent to slavery, and in this amazing country of United States of America, which you will never turn me against. That's the disconnect, family. You can't be thriving in the very country you're describing as fundamentally enslaving you and expect people not to raise an eyebrow. You know? That doesn't mean problems doesn't exist. That doesn't mean the justice system is perfect. But to say that someone who committed a crime, admitted guilt, and serving time is experiencing slavery, that's not serious analysis. That's emotional exaggeration. And regular people see that. If somebody robs a store and get caught and take a plea deal to avoid a longer sentence, that's the legal consequences of their actions. It's not 1850. Nobody owns them, right? Nobody owns them. They wasn't captured or sold. They wasn't forced into into generational bondage. And when you start making those comparisons, you cheapen the actual horror of slavery. You turn one of the worst humane rights abuses in history into a political talking point. And that's why people react the way they do. It's not about denying history, it's about rejecting absurd comparisons that don't hold up under basic common sense. And when you keep hearing arguments like that on national TV, straight face, no pushback, yeah, people are going to say this is nuts. If everything is slavery, then nothing is. If consequences are oppression, then personal responsibility disappears. And that's the bigger issue. At some point, we have to be able to say this analogy doesn't make sense. This comparison is a stretch. This is not reality. And when you refuse to say that, when you just let it slide because you're afraid of how it sounds, that's how conversations completely fall apart.
So to sit here and ask me, what country do I live
Let me
in?
point
It's
something
called
out to
America.
you.
You can't point nothing out.
I do.
That's
I
what
want
you
to
keep
say
getting
this.
confused.
If you were on the
Last
Abby
word,
Phillips
Well, I
show
don't wanna hear
Chinese
it.
version, you wouldn't be
But
here
I'm not the
tomorrow.
Chinese version.
You're
I'm
in
here at the
America. You
American
get to
version.
say
All right.
these
The black.
things.
I know,
You
and
should
I'm
enjoy
saying
your
it, and I'm
freedoms.
saying it, and I'm
And
enjoying
I'm
it, and I
proud that
fought
you
for
can
mine
say that.
and yours.
All
So
right.
thank me for my service.
All right, my friends, listen.
Thank me for my service.
Listen,
I'm not disparaging. I just want you to thank me.
We're going to bring this to a close. I mean, I do think it is worth acknowledging that you don't have to prefer China to say that I want to be able to, in this country,
I just
both
point out,
live in the country and
we're
critique
so
it at
lucky
the
to
same
have
time.
these freedoms
Sure.
and be able. I thank
Yeah,
you for your service,
I know.
by the way.
I think that she's actually saying the same thing, that she's expressing her right to criticize, to acknowledge the past and how bad or how good it was. So I don't know that you guys are all that. I don't know that you guys are all that far.
But nobody
Where do you
despairs
wanna go to?
democracy.
All
And
right.
I answered your question,
All
and
right.
you still didn't deal with
Thank
the
you,
issue at
guys.
hand.
Hey,
Next-
listen, I didn't serve.
Next for
but
us.
I'm
So then
proud
you
to
should
say
The panel is
No,
going to
I
give
should
us
say
their
thank you for your
nightcaps.
service.
It's Alien Edition tonight. We'll be right back.
Well, this is CNN. These are the voices Abby Phillip is choosing to put on national television. And pay attention, she never corrects it. Abby Phillip, as you see on the screen, never corrects it. And these are the people she chooses to put on national television. She never steps in and says, hold on, serving in the military does not automatically make your opinion more valid than anyone else's. She never says, there are people on this panel who didn't serve, and that doesn't mean their voice matters less. Because that's basic logic. Debate doesn't work like that. That's basic logic. Again, I'm going to say it again. And this isn't a hierarchy where whoever has the most impressive resume wins the argument. This is about ideas. That's it. And if a conservative tried the same move, pulled the "I'm a veteran, so you need to be quiet" card, you already know what happened. She would shut that down immediately. And she would say, that's not relevant to the discussion. She would frame it as shutting down debate. She would call it inappropriate. But when it's coming from certain people on the panel, silence. She doesn't correct no one, no pushback, no violence, and that's the issue. A moderator is supposed to moderate. That means keeping things fair and keeping things on track and make sure nobody's using emotional leverage to dominate the room. Think about a classroom. If one student says, "My opinion matters more because of X," and the teacher lets that slide, that's not a fair classroom. That's favoritism, and viewers can see it. People are not blind. They see when certain panelists can say whatever they want, no matter how disrespectful, no matter how condescending, and no matter how off topic. And there's never any accountability. And the one conservative on the panel breathes the wrong way. He could breathe the wrong way, man. And suddenly it's like Abby Phillip goes, "Let's unpack that." And that's why Kevin O'Leary said what he said. You are all nuts. And that's why he hit that point. And because if you're walking into an environment every night where it's 4 against 1, the moderator leans with the 4 and emotional arguments replace logical ones. Eventually, you're going to say, this is nuts. And I agree. And I don't blame him. I'm being serious. Right? Why does any conservative even go on that show at this point? Because what is the goal? It's not a real exchange of ideas. It's not persuasion. It's not productive disagreement. It's an hour of being talked over and framed as the villain. That's not moving a conversation forward. That's theater. And here's the bigger reality. Shows like that don't last forever. When the audience starts seeing the pattern, if it feels repetitive, if it feels one-sided, if it feels like the same script every night, if it feels that way, people tune out. And when people tune out, networks make changes. And I'm telling you right now, they're going to have to shake something up because this formula is stale. And I got a gut feeling that Abby Phillip is heading down the same path as Joy Reid with the divisive rhetoric, with the favoritism and the nonsensical nonsense. And when the brand becomes more about predictable ideological scolding than actual discussion, the clock starts ticking. That's just how television works. Viewers want energy. Yes. They want passion. Yes. But they also want fairness. They want something that at least feels like a real debate. And when it doesn't, they move on. So yeah, Kevin said what he said. And the more this continues, the more people are going to understand exactly why he did, right? And I want to know what you guys think, right? Give this video a big thumbs up. It helps crush that YouTube algorithm. It's totally free. And also, I want to know you guys' comments down below because as always, we're having a conversation. But it also makes me remember and also brings to my mind right now down the path of Stephen Goldberg, who CBS is letting go because the viewership went down. As we know that he's pro-bias, he's left-leaning, he's a biased Democrat supporter, all the way pro-Democrat, radical left individual, and his jokes got stale. The same script every night, and even to the point where he is now being biased within his own party that he is really biased about, right? He was biased towards a certain candidate in the Democrat Party, and that happens to be what I happened to find out was James Tallarico. And the problem was CBS was like, look, well, you have to give equal airtime, not to a conservative, but at least to the other opponent, in this case, within the Democrat Party, the same Democrat Party, because James Tallarico is Democrat. And we know that Jasmine Crockett is Democrat. And he wanted to give an interview for the Texas Democrat State Representative James Tallarico to be aired on CBS, but not for Jasmine Crockett. And that's when the legal advisors at the network of CBS was like, according to FCC rules, there has to be equal time being aired amongst opponents. In this case, James Tallarico and Jasmine Crockett are the ones fighting for the primary when it comes to who is going to represent the Democrat Party against whoever Republican that is going to be the main Republican they debate and go up against when it comes to representing Texas. So I say all that to say that not only is Abby Phillip going down the road of Joy Reid, in my opinion, but also Stephen Colbert or Stephen Colbert, however you say his name. But let me know what you guys think. I'm gonna leave you at that one. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Catch you next one. Peace.